For most of our marriage, I thought we were the couple everyone envied. Sarah and I met when I was 25 and she was 30, a fitness trainer who seemed to have boundless energy and a magnetic smile. She made me feel alive, as if she saw something in me I didn't even know was there. For 5 years, we were inseparable. Or at least I thought so. Lately, though, something felt off. It was hard to put my finger on. Sarah still smiled at me, but there was a subtle shift. Her eyes seemed distant, her laughter less genuine. We used to spend our Sunday mornings on the couch, sipping coffee and talking about our plans, dreams, and random nonsense. Now, she'd be up early, always claiming she had a client to train. The gym session seemed longer than ever, spilling into lunch or dinner. I tried not to let my insecurities show. After all, she was dedicated to her career. How could I resent her for that? But something gnawed at me. It wasn't just the time away. It was the secretive texts, the way she'd lock her phone when I came near. I convinced myself I was imagining things. I loved her too much to think otherwise. Love was about trust, wasn't it? Still, my mind raced with doubts as I drove to work each morning, staring at the empty passenger seat where Sarah used to ride with me. And then there was Adam, the new trainer at her gym. I'd met him at one of their work parties. A younger guy, built like a Greek statue, always flashing that Hollywood smile. I caught Sarah laughing at his jokes that night, a kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. She'd waved it off when I mentioned it later, calling me paranoid. Adam's just a kid, she said. Don't be ridiculous. But that laugh stuck with me. This was my life now. Half believing her and half questioning myself. Maybe I was overthinking it. Or maybe I was finally seeing the cracks in a foundation I thought was unbreakable. As much as I wanted to trust her, I felt the first threads of doubt start to unravel. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. It happened on a Wednesday. A regular, unassuming Wednesday. I had taken the day off work to handle some errands and catch up on projects around the house. Sarah didn't know I'd be home. She'd left early as usual, her gym bag slung over her shoulder and her hair tied up in a ponytail, looking effortlessly radiant. I'll be back late, she said, kissing my cheek without meeting my eyes. Big day with clients. Okay, have a good one, I replied, trying not to sound as bitter as I felt. I spent the morning mowing the lawn, fixing a leaky faucet, and trying to keep my mind occupied. By early afternoon, I was scrolling aimlessly through my phone when a notification popped up. It was from the tracking app we'd both installed years ago, a mutual decision to keep tabs on each other's safety. I hadn't opened it in ages, but something about that day compelled me to look. Her location wasn't at the gym. I blinked, refreshing the screen. Nope, still the same. She was parked at some address I didn't recognize. A private home. My stomach churned. Maybe it was a new client's house? She had mentioned doing private sessions now and then, though it seemed rare. I told myself I was overreacting. Yet, something pulled me to investigate. I plugged the address into my GPS, hopped into my car, and drove with shaky hands. Each mile felt like an eternity, and with every turn, my mind conjured worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, my heart sank. It was a modest suburban house with a neat lawn and a shiny black car parked out front. Not Sarah's. Not mine. But familiar. Adam's car. For a few minutes, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe they were just talking, planning a gym event, or something. But then I saw them. The blinds were half drawn, just enough to give me a clear view of the living room. Sarah and Adam, standing close. Too close. He touched her face, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. She leaned into him, her expression soft and warm, the way she used to look at me. Then she kissed him. The kiss wasn't hurried or awkward. It was passionate, deliberate. My chest tightened, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. The scene played out like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Her hands on his chest, his arms pulling her closer. Every touch was a dagger, every second an eternity. I sat there, frozen, watching the life I thought I had crumble before my eyes. Eventually, I managed to start the car and drive away, my hands trembling on the wheel. My vision blurred with tears, but I forced myself to focus. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. I ended up in an empty parking lot, my head resting on the steering wheel as sobs racked my body. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, shattering everything I thought I knew about her, about us. All the love, the trust, the years we'd built together, it felt meaningless now. I sat there for hours. The image of them together burned into my mind. Finally, I decided what to do. I was going to confront her. Tonight. No waiting, no excuses. I needed answers, no matter how much it hurt. I waited until she came home. Sitting on the couch in the living room, I kept the lights dim, only the glow of a single lamp illuminating the space. My mind was racing, replaying the scene over and over. The kiss, the touch, the way she looked at him. I tried to steel myself for what was coming, but no amount of preparation could make this easier. The door creaked open around 8 p.m., and Sarah stepped in, her usual gym bag slung over her shoulder. She froze when she saw me sitting there. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but it was gone so quickly that I might have imagined it. "Hey," she said, her voice casual, as if everything were normal. "You're home early. Everything okay?" I couldn't stop the bitterness in my laugh. "Am I okay?" "That's an interesting question, Sarah." Her brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, trying to keep my voice steady. "It means I know where you were today. I know about Adam. I know about the house. I saw you." Her expression hardened, and for a split second, I thought she might deny it. But instead, she rolled her eyes, tossing her gym bag onto the floor. "You followed me? Are you serious right now?" "Don't turn this around on me, Sarah," I snapped, my voice rising. "I'm not the one sneaking around and kissing someone else. How long has this been going on? Huh? How long have you been lying to me?" She crossed her arms, her posture defiant. "Don't act like this is all my fault, Aaron. If you'd been paying more attention to me, maybe I wouldn't have had to look somewhere else." I blinked, stunned. Are you blaming me? Are you seriously blaming me for this?" "You're damn right I am," she shot back, her voice sharp. "You're so wrapped up in your little world, work, your hobbies, whatever, that you didn't even notice I was unhappy. Do you know how lonely I've been? How many nights I've gone to bed feeling like a ghost in my own house?" My heart pounded in my chest. "So your solution was to cheat on me? To destroy our marriage instead of talking to me like an adult?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's not like I don't care about you. But I'm tired of feeling like a convenience, like someone you just come home to because it's expected." I stared at her, my hands trembling. "I've given you everything, Sarah. Everything. I've supported you, loved you, trusted you. And this is how you repay me." She shrugged, as if my words meant nothing. "Maybe you shouldn't have trusted me so much. People change, Aaron. Feelings change." Her coldness hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to yell, to throw something. But instead, I just stood there, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. "You know what, Sarah?" I said finally, my voice low and full of venom. "You've made your choice, and now I'm going to make mine." I turned and walked toward the door, grabbing my keys off the counter. "Where are you going?" she called after me, her voice laced with annoyance rather than concern. "Anywhere but here," I said without looking back. "You can have Adam, Sarah. I hope he's worth losing everything." I slammed the door behind me, my heart pounding as I drove into the night. My world had just fallen apart, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. But one thing was clear. The woman I thought I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. And so was the life I'd built with her. I spent the night at a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind of place where no one asks questions, and the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor's TV blaring late into the night. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him, Adam's hands on her, the way she leaned into his touch like I didn't exist. Morning came, harsh and unwelcoming. My phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. Calls and texts from Sarah. At first, I didn't want to read them, but curiosity got the better of me. The texts were all over the place. "We need to talk. You're being ridiculous. This doesn't have to end everything. We can fix this. Why won't you answer me? Fix this? After what I saw, the audacity of her words lit a fire in me. I almost replied, but what was the point? She'd already shown me who she was. Instead, I reached out to the one person I trusted to give me clarity, my best friend, Lucas. Lucas had been my rock since high school. The kind of friend who never sugarcoated the truth, no matter how hard it was to hear. When I told him what had happened, his silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Man, he finally said, his voice heavy. I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry, Aaron. That's brutal. Yeah, I muttered, staring at the cracked ceiling of the motel room. I don't know what to do, Lucas. Part of me wants to fight for her. Part of me wants to just walk away and never look back. Do you really think she deserves that fight? He asked bluntly. His question hit me harder than I expected. Did she deserve it? The Sarah I thought I knew, maybe. But the woman I confronted last night? The one who blamed me for her betrayal, who looked at me with such disdain. I wasn't so sure. She doesn't even seem sorry, I admitted. She just acted like it was my fault, like I pushed her to do this. Lucas sighed. That's what people like her do, Aaron. They twist the knife, make you feel like you're the one who drove them to it. Don't fall for it, man. You deserve better than that. His words hung in the air, and for the first time in hours, I felt a sliver of clarity. He was right. I'd been bending over backward for Sarah for years, putting her needs above my own, trusting her completely. And this was my reward. I need to get out of here. I said finally. Clear my head, figure out what's next. Good, Lucas said. Take some time for yourself. And Aaron, don't let her drag you back into her mess. You're worth more than that. I thanked him and hung up, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite place. Determination, maybe, or the faintest glimmer of hope. That evening, I returned home to grab my things. Sarah was waiting for me, perched on the couch with her arms crossed. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed with red, but her expression was anything but apologetic. You're really doing this? She asked as I walked past her toward the bedroom. I don't see another option, I said, not bothering to look at her. Come on, Aaron, she said, standing up and following me. You're really going to throw away everything we've built over one mistake. I stopped in my tracks, turning to face her. One mistake? That's how you see this? Sarah, you didn't just trip and fall into another man's arms. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and then you had the nerve to blame me for it. She rolled her eyes, her tone sharp. Oh, stop being so dramatic. It wasn't some grand betrayal. It was a fling, okay? It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? My voice cracked, the anger bubbling to the surface. It meant something to me, Sarah. Our marriage meant something to me. Clearly, it didn't mean much to you. For a moment, she was silent, her jaw tightening. Then, with a scoff, she said, fine. Maybe you're right. Maybe we're just not meant to be. You've always been so boring. So predictable. Her words cut deeper than I expected, but I didn't let it show. Thanks for clearing that up, I said coldly. It makes this a lot easier. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out, leaving her standing there, arms crossed and unrepentant. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, pain, yes, but also relief. For the first time in years, I felt free. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I was done with Sarah and the toxic cycle she'd created. It was time to rebuild my life. For me, leaving her felt like walking away from a burning building. Painful, destructive, but necessary to survive. I stayed in the motel for a few days, my emotions shifting wildly between anger, heartbreak, and a numbing emptiness. The nights were the hardest. The silence of the room pressed down on me, filled with memories of Sarah's laugh, her touch, the life we'd built together. Or at least the illusion of it. Work was out of the question. I couldn't focus. My boss, a decent guy, gave me some time off when I muttered something about personal issues. Lucas checked in on me every day, urging me to stay strong, reminding me that better things were ahead. I wanted to believe him, but it felt impossible. One night, a text came from Sarah. Just one sentence. You left, so now what? I stared at the screen, feeling the rage boil beneath my skin. Now what? Now I try to pick up the pieces of my life after you tore them apart. Now I figure out who I am without the person I thought was my partner. I didn't respond. What was the point? Talking to her would only drag me back into the chaos. I turned my phone off and drowned my thoughts in whiskey, hoping the burn would dull the ache in my chest. But the bitterness lingered. Every morning, I woke up to the same questions. Why wasn't I enough? Why did she do this? Was any of it real? On the fourth day, I realized I couldn't keep wallowing in this pit of despair. If I stayed here, I'd lose myself completely. So, I packed my things and drove to the one place that always brought me peace, my parents' old cabin in the mountains. The cabin had been my retreat growing up, a place where I could escape the pressures of life and reconnect with the simpler things. The drive there was long, winding through dense forests and quiet towns. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of calm. Maybe this was what I needed: space, solitude, and time to heal. When I arrived, the cabin was exactly as I remembered it: small, cozy, with the faint smell of cedar and memories of childhood summers. I threw my bag on the bed and stood on the porch, breathing in the crisp mountain air. The silence was a balm, a stark contrast to the noise in my head. That night, as I sat by the fireplace nursing a beer, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of Sarah and me, vacations, holidays, lazy Sundays at home. In every shot, we look happy, perfect even. How much of that had been a lie? I paused on a photo of us at the beach, taken just 6 months ago. Sarah was laughing, her arms around me, her smile so genuine it made my heart ache. That was the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I thought I'd grow old with. But now, looking at her face, all I could see was the betrayal, the lies. And Adam. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to erase every good memory and fill the void with anger. But deep down, I knew that wasn't who I was. I wasn't going to let her actions define me. I wasn't going to let this break me. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. Something better. I didn't know what the future held, but as I sat there watching the flames dance, I made a promise to myself. I would rebuild. I would find my strength again. And I wouldn't let Sarah, or anyone else, steal that from me. The days at the cabin stretched into a week. It gave me the time and clarity I desperately needed. The ache of betrayal was still there, like an ever-present shadow, but the overwhelming grief had started to dull. I wasn't okay, but I was functioning. In that quiet solitude, I thought about what to do next. Divorce was inevitable, but the idea felt heavy and complicated. I'd have to face Sarah again, talk to lawyers, split everything we'd built. It would be messy, painful, and expensive, but it was the only way forward. Late one night, I sat at the old wooden table, a pad of paper in front of me. I started jotting down everything I needed to do. It was a cold, practical list. Find a divorce lawyer. Gather evidence of the affair. Secure my finances. Plan the next phase of my life. The last item was the hardest to write. What did the next phase even look like? All I'd ever wanted was a life with Sarah. Now that dream was gone, replaced with an empty slate I didn't know how to fill. But the more I wrote, the more focused I became. I remembered what Lucas had said. Don't let her drag you back into her mess. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. The next morning, I called Lucas. I'm ready, I told him. I'm going to file for divorce. Good, he said, his voice full of support. Do you need help finding a lawyer? I think I've got it, I said. But there's one other thing. What's that? I want her to regret this, I said, the steel in my voice surprising even me. I want her to know what she's losing. Lucas was quiet for a moment. I get it, he said finally. But don't let revenge consume you, man. Focus on building yourself back up. That's how you win. He was right. Still, the thought of Sarah living her life unscathed while I picked up the pieces of mine made my blood boil. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to understand that she'd thrown away something good, something real. That evening, I drove back to town. The cabin had done its job. It had given me clarity and a plan. But now, it was time to face reality. Time to take the first steps toward reclaiming my life. I started by contacting a divorce attorney. The woman I chose, Diane, came highly recommended. She was sharp, no nonsense, and known for being ruthless when it came to protecting her clients. During our initial consultation, I laid everything out: the affair, the confrontation, my desire to walk away with as little damage as possible. Diane listened carefully, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You have every right to be angry," she said. "But the best thing you can do right now is keep a level head. Focus on the facts, not the emotions. The cleaner we make this, the quicker you can move on." She outlined the steps we'd need to take, from filing the paperwork to negotiating the division of assets. It was overwhelming, but I felt a sense of relief knowing I had someone in my corner. Someone who could help me navigate the storm. Before I left, she gave me a piece of advice that stuck with me. "You've been dealt a bad hand, Aaron," she said. "But don't let this define you. Use it as a stepping stone. Let it push you towards something better." That night, as I lay in bed in a small rented apartment I'd found, I repeated her words to myself like a mantra. Something better. I didn't know what that was yet, but I was determined to find out. And as the days went on, I started to believe I could. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and endless reminders of what I'd lost. Diane was efficient and direct, making the process as smooth as it could be under the circumstances. But each step felt like tearing off a piece of my old life and tossing it into the wind. Sarah didn't make things easy. When she was served the divorce papers, her reaction wasn't remorse or regret. It was fury. She called me, her voice a venomous mixture of anger and disbelief. "Are you seriously doing this?" she spat. "You're just going to throw away everything we built over a mistake?" I held the phone tightly, forcing myself to stay calm. "It wasn't a mistake, Sarah. It was a choice. And now I'm making mine." "You're such a coward," she hissed. "Running away instead of fighting for us." "For me?" I almost laughed at the irony. "Fighting for you? The way you fought for us when you were sneaking around with Adam?" There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment, I thought she might apologize. But instead, she lashed out. "You're not perfect either, Aaron. Maybe if you'd been more present, more exciting, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." The anger I'd been suppressing erupted. "You can keep justifying it all you want, Sarah. Blame me. Blame the universe. Hell, blame Adam for all I care. But you don't get to rewrite history. This is on you." I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding. I knew I'd made the right decision, but her words still stung. Maybe I wasn't perfect. Maybe I could have done more. But wasn't marriage supposed to be about working through those imperfections together? I didn't hear from her for a while after that. The silence was a relief, but it didn't last. About a week later, I got a call from Lucas. "She's not letting this go quietly," he said, his tone cautious. "I heard through the grapevine that she's been telling people you're the one who ruined things. That you weren't supportive, that you pushed her away." My stomach churned. Of course, she'd spin the narrative to make herself the victim. But what could I do? Arguing with her wouldn't change anything, and stooping to her level wasn't an option. Instead, I focused on myself. I threw myself into work, started going to the gym, and even joined a local hiking group to force myself out of the apartment. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like I was rebuilding. But then, out of nowhere, she showed up. It was a Saturday morning, and I was sitting on the patio of a small coffee shop, enjoying the quiet. When I looked up, there she was, standing across the table with her arms crossed. She looked different, tired, maybe even vulnerable. But her eyes still held that defiant edge. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked, my voice flat. "I wanted to talk," she said, pulling out a chair without waiting for an invitation. "About us." "There is no us," I said, meeting her gaze. "Not anymore." She flinched but didn't back down. "I miss you, Aaron. I miss us." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "You don't miss me, Sarah. You miss the idea of me. The stability, the comfort, but you didn't want me when it mattered." "That's not fair," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I made a mistake, yes, but I still love you." "Love?" I scoffed. "You don't destroy the people you love, Sarah. You don't humiliate them. You don't betray them." Her face hardened, and the vulnerability I thought I saw vanished. "Fine," she said, standing abruptly. "Keep playing the victim, Aaron. See where it gets you." She walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement, leaving me sitting there with a hollow ache in my chest. I thought seeing her again might bring closure, but all it did was reopen old wounds. As I watched her disappear down the street, I made a promise to myself. This was the last time I'd let her shake me. The last time I'd let her have power over me. The next chapter of my life was waiting, and I wasn't going to let her hold me back from finding it. After Sarah's dramatic exit from the coffee shop, I felt an odd sense of finality. It was like a door had closed, locking behind her, and for the first time I was okay with that. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to leave the past behind and start walking toward it. Lucas, ever the loyal friend, invited me out that weekend to a small gathering at his house. "You need to be around people who aren't toxic," he said. "And who knows, you might meet someone." I laughed at the idea. "I'm not ready for all that, man." "You don't have to be. Just show up, have a drink, relax." Reluctantly, I agreed. When Saturday rolled around, I put on a decent shirt and headed to Lucas's place. The gathering was small and laid back, a mix of his friends and their significant others. I nursed a beer, making polite conversation, but feeling a little out of place. That's when I met her. Her name was Emily. She was 24, studying to become a teacher, and had a smile that lit up the room. She wasn't flashy or overly polished like Sarah had been. There was a simplicity about her, an authenticity that was both refreshing and disarming. We started talking by chance, bonding over a mutual dislike for one of Lucas's favorite beers. What began as a casual exchange quickly deepened into an effortless flow of conversation. She was funny, kind, and genuinely curious about my life. Not out of politeness, but because she seemed to care. "I'm sorry if I'm asking too much," she said at one point, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I just think it's fascinating how people rebuild after something tough." "It's okay," I said, surprised at how easy it was to open up to her. "Honestly, I'm still figuring that out." We talked for hours, oblivious to the rest of the party. By the time the night wound down, I realized I hadn't thought about Sarah once. Emily wasn't just a distraction. She was a reminder that there were still good people in the world. People who saw you for who you were, not for what you could give them. When it was time to leave, she hesitated. "This might be forward," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "but I'd really like to see you again." I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, hope. "I'd like that too." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of quiet, happy moments. Walks in the park, late-night talks about everything and nothing, her laughter ringing in my ears like music. She didn't push me to move faster than I was ready for, and for that, I was grateful. Being with her felt easy, natural, as if life had finally decided to throw me a lifeline after drowning me for so long. Sarah, on the other hand, didn't take the news of my newfound happiness well. When she heard through the grapevine that I was seeing someone, she sent me a series of scathing texts, accusing me of moving on too quickly and calling Emily a rebound. I didn't respond. There was no point. Sarah had already taken too much from me. She wasn't going to take this too. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the porch of my apartment watching the sun dip below the horizon, she reached over and took my hand. "I don't know what you've been through entirely," she said softly, "but I know you deserve happiness, Aaron. You deserve someone who sees you and chooses you every single day." Her words hit me like a warm wave, washing away the last remnants of doubt and pain. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed them. I squeezed her hand, smiling as the weight of the past began to lift. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the hurt, but finding something or someone who made it all feel worth it. Emily became the bright spot in my life, a gentle force that helped me rebuild what Sarah had broken. It wasn't just her kindness, it was her patience, her understanding. She never pressed for details about my past unless I wanted to share. And when I did, she listened without judgment, offering support instead of solutions. But moving forward also meant tying up loose ends. The divorce was nearing its final stages, and while I'd mostly avoided direct contact with Sarah, there were still moments when her presence lingered like a ghost. She'd send occasional texts, some laced with bitterness, others dripping with feigned regret. One day, I got a call from Diane, my lawyer. Sarah wants to meet and finalize the division of assets in person, she said. I advised against it, but ultimately it's your choice. My initial reaction was a hard no. I didn't want to see her again, didn't want to reopen wounds that were finally starting to heal. But as I thought about it, I realized something. I needed closure. Not for her, but for me. I needed to face her one last time. Not as the broken man she left behind, but as someone who had found strength in spite of her betrayal. I'll do it, I told Diane, but only if it's on my terms. The meeting was set for the following week at a neutral location, a conference room at Diane's office. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of nerves and determination as I walked in, dressed in a sharp suit Emily had helped me pick out. I wanted Sarah to see that I wasn't the man she had discarded. I was stronger now, more sure of myself. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting across the table. She looked different, tired, drawn. Her usual confidence seemed dulled, replaced by something almost vulnerable. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was fleeting. "Hello, Aaron," she said, her voice softer than I expected. "Sarah," I replied, keeping my tone neutral as I took a seat. The conversation started with formalities, discussions about the house, the bank accounts, the car. Diane handled most of it, her efficiency cutting through any tension. Sarah and I barely exchanged words, our interactions reduced to polite nods and brief acknowledgments. But as the meeting wrapped up, Sarah looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "Aaron, can we talk? Just the two of us." I hesitated, glancing at Diane, who gave a subtle nod. "Fine," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Say what you need to say." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I know I hurt you, and I know I can't take it back. But I need you to know that it wasn't about you. It was my own issues, my own insecurities. I listened, waiting for the anger or resentment to flare up, but it didn't. Instead, I felt nothing. Her words, while perhaps sincere, no longer had the power to affect me. "Thank you for saying that," I said simply. "But it doesn't change anything. What's done is done, Sarah. I've moved on. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." Her expression faltered, a flicker of something like regret crossing her face. "You've changed," she said quietly. "I had to," I replied, standing. "Take care of yourself, Sarah." And with that, I walked out, leaving her behind for good. Later that night, I told Emily about the meeting. She listened intently, her hand resting on mine as I recounted the conversation. When I finished, she smiled. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You didn't let her bring you down." I realized she was right. Seeing Sarah again hadn't been easy, but it had reminded me of how far I'd come. I wasn't the broken man she left behind. I was someone stronger, someone ready for a new chapter. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Months passed, and the chapter of my life with Sarah faded further into the background. The divorce was finalized with little fanfare, and the house, our old home, was sold. Splitting the proceeds was painful, not because of the money, but because it felt like saying goodbye to a part of myself. Still, it was necessary, a symbolic way of moving forward. Emily became more than just someone I was dating. She became my partner in every sense of the word. She had a way of grounding me, reminding me of the good in life, even when I couldn't see it. I never felt judged or rushed with her, only supported. With her, I felt whole again. One evening, as we sat on a blanket at a local park watching the sunset, I turned to her and smiled. "You've changed my life, you know that." She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think you're giving me too much credit." "I'm serious," I said, taking her hand. "You helped me remember what it feels like to be happy, to feel valued." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't pull away. "Aaron, you've done all the work. You were always stronger than you realized." Her words stayed with me. Stronger than I realized. Maybe I had been. The betrayal, the heartbreak, it had tested me in ways I never thought I could endure. But I'd come out the other side, not just surviving, but thriving. The future no longer felt like a looming question mark. It felt like a promise, one I was ready to embrace. A few weeks later, Emily and I went to a small cafe in town to celebrate her graduation from her teaching program. It It was a warm evening, the kind that made you want to linger outside just to soak in the atmosphere. As we sat at our table, a familiar face walked in, Sarah. For a moment, our eyes met. She hesitated, as if she were deciding whether to approach. Then she gave me a small, almost sad smile and turned away, taking a seat at a table across the room. Emily noticed. "Do you want to leave?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "No, I've fine." And I was. Seeing Sarah again didn't hurt the way it once would have. It felt like seeing a stranger, a distant memory of a life I no longer belonged to. Emily squeezed my hand under the table, her presence grounding me. When we left the cafe later that evening, I glanced back once, catching a glimpse of Sarah sitting alone, staring out the window. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of pity, but it passed quickly, replaced by gratitude for where I was now. As Emily and I walked down the street hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The past had been painful, but it had led me here, to a life and a love I never could have imagined. And for that, I was grateful. What are your thoughts on my story? Let me know in the comments what you think about my choice and how you might have dealt with it.